So, it's a brand new world as Donald Trump comes into his presidential powers and begins signing all sorts of presidential orders. But what's going to happen to the economy? Is Donald Trump, with his America First slogan, actually going to let the dollar collapse? Well, I believe he is, but sort of. Now, as we all know, the main problem is that the American economy is over 20 trillion in debt, much to overseas buyers of treasury bonds. Now, what on earth can he do about this? Well, if you look into Donald Trump's history, he has a massive history of being able to erase debt from the companies that he works for, or owns, should I say. Now, he can bring all of this expertise to bear on America's economy, but it won't dig the dollar out of its despair. But what could he do? And this is just obviously, this is my extrapolation based on the common things that are known about Donald Trump. First of all, it's been reported a number of times that he is in favour of a gold-backed currency, which the American dollar is not. And with the sort of reserves that the United States has, with its 8 tons or so of gold, it's not really going to work because there's not enough gold there to support the number of dollars that are out there. The only thing that can happen is if the price of gold goes up, and goes up by a substantial amount, not just in the dollar but in the other currencies around the world. So his first priority, if he wants to go for a gold-backed currency, is to actually increase the price of gold. Now, how can he do this? There is a lot of ways he can do this, and the first thing he can do, which he should do as a businessman, is find out where he is, and that is to order a proper audit of the American gold reserves, which hasn't been done for decades. And by a proper audit I mean compare serial numbers and markings on the bars to those recorded, and to drill holes in the centre of the bar, just tiny 1mm holes, assay the bar to make sure it really is gold and what the percentage is, and it's not just a thin layer of gold wrapped around some other metal. And then, having done that, he will know the true state of the American gold reserves, but also this is liable, the interest is liable to spark an increase in gold price. Because after all, if suddenly America is interested in gold, or for decades they've been saying, oh, gold isn't money, the Fed's been saying this, and that gold is unimportant, and so on and so forth, that interest by itself will spark a rise in gold prices. Now, the other thing he can do is get rid of the manipulation via the paper markets. Now, how can you do this? There's quite a simple way he can do this. He could require that all companies offering contracts in precious metals keep a minimum of 10% of the value of those contracts in their vaults in actual metal. And this would be a huge problem, obviously, because then it would suddenly become public knowledge that they don't actually have much gold, and it would be seen as just a return to normal fiscal probity, because normally banks have a 10-to-1, historically they've had a 10-to-1 ratio between the assets that they've got and the amount that they're allowed to lend. So there would be nothing particularly unusual about this. It would just be enforcing that level of financial probity, which is something he's already hinted at doing with banks. Because the next thing to remember is that Donald Trump simply hates banks. They've driven him out of business a number of times, and those wounds hurt. So he does hate banks and he hates bankers. So what would he do with the Fed? Well, that's a good question. Now, we have to look at America's Donald's policies here, and this is America first, and it's created a dynamic booming economy, and he's well on his way to doing that with all these new industrial agreements that he's actually signed, and he's making sure that everything that's built in America is made with American staples such as steel for the pipelines, and this will have a big effect. This will have a big effect on growth, a big effect on jobs, but you're still left with the problem of the dollar. And here's America's unchanging gold reserves, 8.133 tonnes. Hasn't changed at all. That's if you believe they've actually got any. Now, there's a number of people who are saying, well, America hasn't actually got any gold. Really, what's in Fort Knox? A big empty hole. But I don't actually believe that. I think that America has some gold, whether it's the 8 tonnes that they're saying they've got or not, I don't know. But he needs to do an audit to confirm that, as I've already said. So what can he do with the Fed? Well, there are a lot of people who think that the Federal Reserve is unconstitutional, that the Federal Reserve Act itself in 1913 actually goes completely against the American Constitution, which it certainly seems to do, because the only people who have the power to set interest rates and create money is the government in the Constitution, not some other company. And we have to remember that the Federal Reserve is not federal, it's a private company. And the board is a deep, dark secret. We know who they were in 1917, there's a picture there. We don't know who they are now, but you can be sure that the Rothschilds are on there, and there's rumours that the Queen of England is a board member, and various other people who have a vested interest in the banking system and the monetary system. But it is a private company. It's not at all federal. And the next thing is, it doesn't have any reserves. It doesn't really own anything apart from a few buildings. So this whole Federal Reserve name is a complete smokescreen. It's designed to make you think that it's some sort of government institution, whereas it isn't. And this is one way to pop it under the radar, so lots and lots of people don't turn around and say, oh, it's unconstitutional, because it is. And there is a whole big article here on Liberty Law site about the Federal Reserve and how constitutional or unconstitutional it is, and there is a lot of arguments for it being unconstitutional, and the opinions of a lot of people, including senior lawyers, are that it is not constitutional. So what does this mean? Well, there are a lot of precedents in the American legal system of contracts being held unconstitutional and being just dissolved. Yes, the Federal Reserve is on very shaky ground, and the President could dissolve it at any time and take away all these powers that they have to print money, to sell bonds, etc., etc. But I don't think he would actually be silly enough to do that. I think what he would do is simply say, right, the relationship with the government is over. You no longer have the ability to set interest rates. We'll let you keep the dollar, and you can do everything with the dollar that you've always done. And then go and create a new cashless dollar an e-dollar, which would be totally controlled by the government. And this is already happening in a way in the UK. For a long time we've had a semi-cashless economy. Most people, I mean, I now don't carry very many banknotes. There are contactless cards, they're accepted everywhere, and you've got Apple Pay, Android Pay on mobile phones, and people are using this more and more and more. The company I work for currently is totally cashless. We don't actually allow people to pay in cash. You have to use a contactless card or a prepaid card or something else to actually pay. And these companies are accepting very small payments. Very small payments. So we're well on our way in Britain to having a cashless economy. And I don't actually see any real barrier to America going for a cashless e-dollar. And remember, this could be totally controlled by the government. And Donald could use the existing facilities in the government to actually create a national bank where every citizen would have a bank account automatically. Non-citizens would not have one unless they applied. And for 6 months or so, he could allow people to change dollars for e-dollars at an exchange rate, where the e-dollar would be, say, $1.10. And why would people want to do this? Because they would, in the same way as when they introduced the dollar, they would make it illegal for anyone to pay any government department in anything except e-dollars. They would make it impossible for people to use the dollar in any meaningful way. If you remember, the sort of government payments we're talking about is income tax. Well, a lot of people have to pay income tax, not everyone. Import duty, export duty, that takes care of the companies. They're going to certainly have to have a lot of e-dollars. And what does this do to the price of the dollar? Well, the price of the original cash dollar would dive at a stroke, reducing America's debt by as much as 95%. If a dollar ends up being worth 5 cents compared to what it's worth now, then obviously that is a huge reduction in America's debt. And yes, the international community would scream, but it would be legal. It wouldn't be America turning around and saying, oh, we're not going to pay. Because remember, all of these bonds are written in US dollars. If the US dollar now becomes worth very little, then America's debt tends to go away. And the citizens of America, who Donald Trump is pledged to protect, would still have their money because they would have converted to e-dollars. Now, the contactless part of it needs to be launched, and nearly everyone's got a smartphone, so this could be done with an app instantaneously to all the millions of Americans that have a smartphone. Anyone else could go out and buy a little device for $20, which would let them just do transfers between each other and between them and shops and so on and so forth. Now, I can see this happening because I'm in a country where to a large extent it already has happened, and it has benefits. The sort of benefits it has, well, imagine drug dealers. Every time they make a transaction, has to be through a government account. unless they want a few wheelbarrow loads full of dollars in exchange for their product. This would be exceptionally inconvenient. And certainly if people want to pay cash for things, they can. They can use gold or they can use silver. But the underground economy would be significantly crippled because the government would have oversight of every single payment and every single credit to those accounts. So the anti-terrorism benefit, the security benefit to the United States would be incalculable. Well, this is all just my opinion. This is all just what I think could happen. But it is a way for America to save itself, collapse the dollar, protect its citizens, and come out of the crisis that it's in with very little damage. And Trump's history, I think, makes this quite a likely thing to happen. So, I hope you've enjoyed this, and if you have found it useful, thought-provoking, please subscribe, it's free, and share it to your friends on social media, and I'll see you soon. Thank you very much.
Well, you could subscribe to Arduinotronic, or just go jump in a lake.